Okay, we are live. Excited to be here. Our third Wednesday of the month of May already. We're at CPT Build, and this is our professional knowledge. Our professional build is what we call it, to help build your knowledge of what you need to know in today's trending business world. So I have with me today Sean, Marcel, and myself. Let's come on stage here and hang on. There we go.
Hey, good
Didn't click
morning,
hard
Lisa.
enough. Good morning, Sean. How are you?
Good. Happy
Great. Well,
hump
I'm
day.
excited. Yeah, I know, right? Wednesday's always a good day though, because you started your week, you're in the midst of it, you're getting ready for the Friday. I think it's always a good day for the work week. So I'm very
Yep,
excited for you to introduce the company that's going to teach us so much and tell us what we need to know, Telesystem. So I'll go ahead and just turn it over to you, and we'll get started on the CPT builds. Thank you.
great. Thank you so much. So, for everybody out there, I'm Sean Marcel, one of the managing partners at Cirrustel, and what we do is we help match. We're expert matchmakers between technology providers and clients' needs. And today we're going to talk about something that is always out there in the business world today. I know every single day I'm seeing no matter what kind of firewall we have or a customer has in place, what kind of cyber tools, you're still seeing the various attacks. And we're going to talk about those attacks and what I feel is the number one thing companies can be doing to prevent hackers. And as the shirt says here, this is a Telesystem uh, theme here, hackers suck. And I think everybody would agree that hackers suck. So today we have two gentlemen from Telesystem. We have Henry, who supports us here at Cirrustel, and we have the expert in Scott that he's going to take and walk us through everything you can do to protect your business from using, this one particular technology or methodology against hackers so that you aren't baptized by fire in the event that you do get breached. So, Scott, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll go through, and hopefully everybody will gain something from this today.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having us, and hello everyone. Glad to be with you today. So yes, so hackers suck. Even though I will say I am one. So we're talking about the bad guys, right? I think when people hear hacker, they automatically think, yeah, the bad guys are sitting in the cave, right, with their hoodie on and gonna attack you, right? So let's talk about kind of how to navigate the cyber threat landscape, because it changes all the time, right? This talk, if I give this in 6 months, this talk will be vastly different. There'll be a lot of different things. But I want everybody to understand what they're facing and give you some keys on how to mitigate some of that risk, right? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're all about, is mitigating risk and making sure that everybody can be a bit better protected, right? It's a journey for certain. So let's get into it. A little bit about me. I like to make brisket. I live in East Texas. When you say barbecue in Texas, you have to think brisket. It's brisket. That's it. Ribs,
Yeah, the
no.
best is in Texas for sure when it comes to brisket. Been there for work many times, so it looks like we need to stop at your house on
That's
the
right.
way
That's
here.
right. Yeah. So I love to do this. And you say, well, Scott, what does this have to do with cybersecurity? Well, not much, but I'll tie it together at the end. And so stay tuned to the end, and I'll kind of bring it together. But I love doing this. And it's a labor of love for sure. You do that. It's a 16 to 24-hour process. And what better thing to do while you're tending a brisket than to be hacking a company's website, right? Because they've asked me to, because they've asked me to compromise them and that kind of stuff, and so they want to see what their vulnerabilities are. So, so I'll talk a little bit about my baptism by fire, how I got thrown into the deep end of the pool. We'll talk about the threat landscape. We'll talk about some vertical specific threats so that everybody can kind of see, hey, if I'm in one of these four verticals, here's what I need to be aware of. the impact it's having on business. We'll give you some strategies, and we'll wrap it up with a case study. And certainly, as you guys have questions, as you folks come up with things, put them in the chat, and I think we can take those on the fly.
Yeah, when we get to the end, we'll be able to go through them for sure. Maybe even on the fly, like you said. And something I just want to mention to everybody too that's out there now that we're in here a few minutes is on the event, you would have seen if you email me your business name and job title and everything, along with the domain, we can do a dark web analysis and report for you. But you got to email me, and my credentials and everything will be at the very end of the presentation to do that. So, Scott, what about yourself? Have you ever been involved in a breach? You say baptism by fire. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. I'll keep the story brief, but I remember very vividly. I was working for a large multi-specialty medical practice. I was the CIO, IT director, taking care of all of that type of thing. I was standing in Costco with my family, and I will never forget. My chief medical officer called me on the phone and said, "Hey, Scott, we've got a breach." And I said, "What are you talking about? This is Saturday afternoon. What are you talking about?" He said, "No." He said, "We've got a breach." I said, "None of my guys have. Nobody on my team has reached out to me." He said, "Trust me." He said, "Get to where you can." He said, "We need to have a conversation here in about 20 minutes." So, okay, great. Get out of Costco. Get everybody. Get the family all loaded up. Get home. And come to find out, we had an individual working for us who was doing some process improvement work. He was trying to figure out how to make the physicians, and the medical staff, how to make their schedules more dense to fit more patients in, because we were just getting a backlog of patients, which seems pretty innocuous. And he should just been able to do that looking at the appointment types and that kind of stuff. Well, this guy just said, "You know what? I'm going to collect everything I can out of the electronic medical record. I'm going to put it on a shiny new MacBook Pro." And so he gathered patient names, dates of birth, diagnoses. I mean, everything.
All the
Social
HIPAA
security
data.
numbers. Yes, all the HIPAA data. And just totally disregarded, the minimum necessary rule. Put everything on this laptop. And as he was doing his work, he then had a conference in Portland, Oregon, and he left that laptop on the front seat of his car in the parking garage at the Portland Convention Center. It just defies logic, right? But anyways, some opportunistic folks walked by, smashed the window, stole the laptop. They didn't know there was patient data on that, but it didn't matter to CMS, Medicare, Health and Human Services, the folks who regulate and make sure you're following all the HIPAA rules. We were facing a $6 million fine that would have absolutely buried us because of that much data that was out there and exposed. And I'm happy to say, after 9 months of just throwing myself at the mercy of Health and Human Services and jumping through every hoop that they put in front of me, we came out with a $0 fine assessed. It was almost unprecedented and unheard of, but
definitely a story of baptism by fire, because who would have thought an employee would take this data, put it on there, right?
Yeah.
It's just human. It's human error, and I think that's the number one thing that we're going to be discussing today, for the most part, is human error and what you can do to educate and prevent, mishaps from coming. So, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my story. So, but so at the end of the day, and so I had to learn quickly a lot of the cybersecurity stuff and really just get myself immersed. And you can kind of see those. So being a security architect is easy. It's like riding a bike, right? Except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, everything's on fire, and you're in hell. And you're thinking, boy, could this get any worse? And you say, well, so with that as a backdrop, buckle up. Let's
yeah. So before we dive in, you mentioned riding a bike. Yeah. And I know bikes have changed over the years. I see kids zipping around my neighborhood on electric bikes that I think are actually like motorcycles from when I was a kid, except they're electric powered, not gas powered. Our bikes, you had to pedal them, and
That's right.
maybe you wanted a BMX kind of thing or something like that. But the bikes has changed. So with that in mind, how has the threat landscape changed over the years, and where are
Absolutely.
we today?
Yeah, it has changed dramatically. It's changed dramatically even in, I'd say, the last 6 months to a year. Let's advance real quick here.
Okay.
And so I'll explain what that is. And you say, well, gee, people are still getting compromised. It's kind of the way people are getting compromised. And I'll talk about that specifically in a second, right? But let's kind of set the stage. So we have an expanding attack surface. Everybody remembers COVID, right? Where we said, hey, people need to get out of the workspace. We need to send them home. We made Swiss cheese out of the corporate networks. We sent everybody home with a laptop to work from their house, and their networks at home are already like Swiss cheese, right? Because they've got
Mhm.
their TVs, they've got their kids, they've got their refrigerators online and all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff, right?
as you say, all the IoT there, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
connected.
So we've taken and made Swiss cheese out of the corporate network. We've made Swiss cheese out of the home network, and we've got a double Swiss cheese sandwich. I'm not a huge fan of Swiss cheese. I don't like it, but that's kind of where things happen, right? So now our attack surface is much larger because people are still working remotely and that sort of thing. I work remotely. I'm working out of the comfort of my own home, right? We have a rise in ransomware attacks, and why? Because ransomware pays. It still pays. People are getting compromised. They pay to get their stuff back, to get things unencrypted, and it's a big winner. Um, and but but where we're seeing ransomware hitting a lot more is not just necessarily on the individual corporate office, right? We're seeing supply chains being compromised. And why is that? Well, it's easier for me to get someone to pay, and I say me and we and them as attackers because I always have to think like an attacker, so I
Mhm.
use those interchangeably. But it's easier to get someone to pay if you're going to disrupt either the ingress, raw materials coming in, or finished product going out. If I can disrupt that supply chain, you're suddenly sitting on lots of money in inventory, and I'm killing your cash flow. And so people are going to be more apt to pay and less willing to, less interested in negotiating, because right now business is stopped, right? They're going to lose their
Mhm.
business
Yeah,
quick.
it's more lucrative for them to
Yeah.
just lock you out of the system and halt business and like you said, supply chains or infrastructure. I mean, you have cities actually in the news. There was one not too far from me here in Tampa that experienced an attack, and
Yep.
um, it's not wanting to get in and do more corporate theft of intellectual property, which we might have all thought was maybe the reason people are getting into things. It seems like it's evolved. Let's just get in, and we're going to see some of the ways they can get in today.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
let's just get in and let's just shut them down
Yeah.
and make them pay ransom, right?
Right. Right. And you look at their tactics. Their tactics are changing, right? So it's not just a one and done. I'm not going to ransom somebody once, right? I encrypt their data. They pay me to get those encryption keys back, and then they can get back access to their data. No, you're getting a double and a triple extortion. The double extortion is where they've stolen your data and are threatening to release it online, and you say, well, not only is it encrypted, but a copy of it is out there on the dark web now, ready to be exposed, right? And I don't want to go through all of that, because that begets, you start losing public trust, right?
Mhm.
The face of your corporation is now in the limelight, and people are saying, boy, you're a risk and you just lost all my data, right? So you're going to pay that second, that double extortion, to make sure that stays out of the news, right? It doesn't get released out of the dark web. And then the triple extortion is the subjects of that data, right? So you have folks. So in my case, right, with protected health information, right, the patients, they're going to go after the patients and say, boy, it sure would be, unfortunate if your data ended up out on the dark web, wouldn't it, right? So they're going to go after the patients, and the patients are going to pay to make sure that their information doesn't get released out there, right?
And they got
Their
their
medical.
information to attack them personally, to try to get into their personal
Yeah.
machines as well. Yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. And so, so that's the thing. So if they can compromise you once and get 3, maybe even 4 payments out of it, I mean, they've hit pay dirt. So, and what we're seeing in the tactics that are changing, right? This is perfect right here. So it used to be where they would send in a malware file, right? Some sort of executable that would go in. You'd click on it, and then boom, your computer, you get that blue screen, and it says, you're infected. Pay X amount in Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. We're not seeing that as much. What we're seeing a lot more now is fileless, malware-free activity, fileless malware. And you say, well, what is that? That is where people are getting onto your workstation. They're getting around and getting all over your network. They're understanding your network, and they're doing all kinds of things before they ever do anything with encrypting data or anything like that, right? Because this facilitates them getting that data, exfiltrating it out of your network and into their possession. And what they want to do is outlast maybe some of your backups. There's a number of reasons why they're doing this. And so you can see this breakout time, 84 minutes, right? So from the time that Sally in accounting clicks on something, and that initial access is granted to a bad actor, right? Let's say they have she gets a PDF invoice or something that she's going to pay. But attached to that is a malicious script that runs in the background, and reaches out to PowerShell. Then PowerShell then reaches out to the internet, downloads, opens up a connection to a command and control server out there on the internet, and allows the bad actor in. He now has a foothold, right? It's about 84 minutes on average, and actually this is kind of an old time. It's 62 minutes now, where they're moving from that initial point, Sally's computer, to Bob's computer, to the CEO's computer, right?
Going horizontal across the organization.
Exactly.
And is it mostly a link in an email that is getting them in?
It could be
into that breaking time on the malware side.
Yep.
Like that's
It could be that. It could be nothing in the email. It could just be, there's all kinds of scripts that can get attached to things that don't even need to execute or run. And
wow, I didn't
or
realize
don't
that.
they don't need the user to necessarily do something, right? They will just boom, the minute they open up the email, something executes in the background and starts running and doing its badness, right? And so that's where we'll talk about putting some tools in place to kind of limit some of that activity from happening, right? So, yeah, and then you can kind of see the examples, so the industrial control systems, you talked about cities, governments, look at water supplies, look at power plants, right? These guys are typically classic victims because they're running these large industrial control systems, these SCADA systems, but they don't have 3 or 4 or 5 backups of these systems. They have maybe one system and a redundant failover system, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have 18 that they can fail over to, right? So those are getting compromised. There's all types of ways that these are happening. This transient cyber asset is probably one that we see, and that's where, say you have you're in a building, it's got a heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. The folks, the HVAC repair guys come in, they bring their laptops in, they connect to your network to run diagnostics on those systems, and those systems, the laptops that they bring might be compromised or something.
Yeah, so they're connecting to, when you say like, removable media, it's also and they're a trusted source, right? They're a
Yeah.
trusted source of your company coming in.
Yeah.
You're not thinking to scan their computers necessarily or anything, right?
Right.
You're counting on them that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And something that comes to mind for me similar to that is when we talked about, the remote workforce, which is maybe one positive thing out of COVID, is now a lot of people get to enjoy working from home more, but more and more in the business world, we're using our own endpoints, cell
Yeah.
phones, tablets, um, laptops to be able to connect to and do work into the different systems.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. So,
Right.
specific verticals, do we want to jump into that here on this slide with some maybe specific threats associated with it?
Yeah. So I'll just touch on this real quick. So you can kind of see. So take the technology sector out. They have a large system development lifecycle, right? So and they're trying to get things to market quickly. Security may or may not be baked into it. And so that's probably why I think they're leading the pack there at 21%, right? But then you look at everybody else: finance, healthcare, telecommunications, retail, manufacturing. Everybody else is an equal opportunity player, right? Everybody gets to share the love, right? It's not one specific vertical that is really getting hammered. Everybody gets equal play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into and talk about the first couple here: the finance and healthcare. Go ahead and let's advance to the next one. So this is where things diverge just a bit between some of these verticals, right? We'll talk about 4 of them here. So finance. I say finance, by and large, gets the sticky gold star for outstanding preventive measures, especially on their exterior, right? They're very hardened. You would expect that, right? They're dealing with your money, and they have lots of risk and money on the line, right? So they get the sticky gold star for spending the most amount.
That's what I was just going to say. It's because they actually put the budget towards it.
Right.
Maybe more so than other verticals that feel some of these prevention methods are additional costs, and they got to weigh that risk benefit more so in their mind.
The emphasis for these guys, to compromise a financial institution comes a little differently, right? They're not going to come from the outside traditional trying to break through their firewall or compromise their web application or something like that, right? They're going to the focus is on financial fraud, data breaches, right? So if I can capture the data, extort those people, because now I've compromised those folks, or if I can interrupt a wire transfer, wire transfer fraud, that type of thing, or if I can somehow siphon off and divert funds, right? And how do we do that? Well, they're going to be going for an insider, so an insider threat, either somebody they can pay to do what they need to do, or some unwitting person, again, that comes in, finds maybe a USB drive in the parking lot and plugs it into the network, kind of just walking it in and getting it in on the network, right? Or sophisticated phishing attacks, right? We're seeing those get very, very complex and not as easy to spot for the humans. So that's kind of where they're getting hit, right? On the other hand, healthcare, they have a lot of sensitive data, but healthcare, and I come out of healthcare. I've been in healthcare since the 1990s, right? So it's been a while, but we sort of trailed behind, mostly because there's a lot of FDA requirements before you can secure or encrypt certain devices, right? So they're just kind of out there. There's not a lot of protection you can put around them. That's changing now, right? But they're still kind of a little bit behind. But we've got vulnerabilities in these connected medical devices that are now running over the internet. People have pacemakers, and their pacemaker talks via Bluetooth to a machine that sits in their on their home network. And then that's going out over the internet, feeding that data back to a cloud instance, and then the providers logging in and getting that read and all that kind of stuff and making adjustments. And they can even make adjustments over the internet, right? So you kind of start looking at some of that and say, boy, oh boy, and again, there's not a lot that you can do to change or harden those, right? Because we're trying to make it convenient so a patient doesn't have to go into the office and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I mean that when you talk about that, I just can't help because I'm old enough with 4 grandkids to remember watching Terminator in 1984 as a kid
right.
and a teenager, and thinking, this is so far fetched kind of thing, but it was cool, right?
Yep.
And Skynet, and we're actually now basically almost living that Skynet fear of the ability to control these devices, through AI or people.
Yep. I think you get the sticky gold star for bringing up AI first. So two other verticals, manufacturing, again, supply chain disruption, right? If I can disrupt that production process, cash is king, and people are going to pay that ransom, right? Intellectual property theft, industrial espionage, that kind of stuff. Manufacturing has some good expertise, right? But they don't have the cybersecurity expertise. They've got folks who can run a CNC machine and build stuff, engineers, that kind of stuff, right? But they may not have a tremendous focus or a deep enough bench on the cybersecurity side. And so they can be compromised in that regard. And then retail. Retail's my favorite, right? Who hasn't been to a retail establishment in the last 24, 48 hours? I think everybody has been, right? And what are you seeing, right? You're not necessarily seeing these credit card terminals. You're seeing a cash register, right? But it's not the old school cash register where you chunk, and the numbers are popping up on the thing, right? It's an actual computer. It's a computer. It's a workstation. It's got a USB. So somebody enterprising like myself or a bad actor can plug in
even right at the terminal, right? Even right at that terminal that they flip around, and now it has the tip thing on there that even though you're picking up your food, now you're getting dinged for tips. But that's a whole other webinar, I think, just on how people feel about that. But it's amazing that it's right there, and so if that's not locked down properly, right, you have it. And the gas station is famous, right, for them jiggering with the unit, and now your card information is captured, and so on and so forth. So
so let me talk about this real quick, right? So you say, okay, that's a USB drive. Actually, it's not. This is a USB rubber ducky. It presents itself as a keyboard. So even if someone says, well, I shut down and I don't allow removable storage device, okay, that's fine. But this thing shows up as a keyboard. It's got a processor in here, a Linux processor. I can plug this in. This will run hundreds of commands a second, and it will basically do my bidding. So if I can somehow get access to that USB, right? And so the person's behind the screen, behind the monitor, they're not paying attention. I could just easily plug this in, and it can do my bidding, and you piggyback off of their network connection, get out to the internet. It can establish a remote command and control connection for me, and then I can be on that machine, and now I can start capturing all that traffic. I can start seeing the credit card transactions going across, right? So I'm that man in the middle. And then we have something else too that you say, well, what's that? That is looks like a USB lightning cable. Well, it is. And you say, well, it's got blue tape. I've noticed that. Well, the blue tape is for me when I go out on physical engagements, right? But I can plug this.
Yeah, you don't plug it in.
I plug this into the network, and it does the same thing. It's got a wireless connection. I could plug this in and just leave it there. I don't have to plug anything on the other end. This will create a wireless connection, and I can sit in the lobby or just outside with my computer and do the exact same thing. And suddenly I'm on that computer, and I can start.
And you're seeing the screen as well, and you basically have your own keyboard, And I've seen this at some of the conferences, and it blew my mind just how social engineering
Yeah.
really with these tools make it almost impossible um, to
Right.
prevent, if you're not really paying attention as a human, right? We all go to the airport, we all bring our work devices, we
Yeah.
all need our phone charged because we can't live without everything being instantaneous or
Yeah.
checking Facebook or whatever it may be. And you're low on power, and the person sitting next to you seems like a nice person. And oh, can I
Well,
borrow your charger? Right? And
right. Yeah.
they're
And then
they're a
and then if
malicious
they do,
actor.
yeah, if they do connect on the other end, you can get everything off the phone too. So it's like, hey, I found some
Yeah,
great music and whatever, and say, oh man,
it's
right?
crazy.
So
It's crazy. It's not a rubber ducky like in our day where you wanted that in the bathtub
right,
kind of thing.
exactly. Yep, exactly. So
So what can we do about this? So tell us let's get
yeah,
into it. What do we do about it?
yeah. Let's jump ahead. So now that we're all scared, again, I don't like to use fear. Uh, I just want to draw awareness to what people may experience, and then how they can help and prevent some of this stuff. Right? There's measures they can take. I will say, prevention will fail. All prevention measures will fail eventually. Right? It just has to last long enough that we can detect what's going on and respond right before that prevention wears out. I'll touch on that a little bit more, right? But let's talk about what we can do. So we have to shore up our humans, right? So people are getting socially engineered, right? They're getting the emails, they're getting texts, they're getting phone calls, they're folks are using artificial intelligence. They're using generative AI to make it seem like it's a legitimate person, uh, either via text or via audio, even some with video, with some deep fakes, right? That's still a little ways off, but it's getting a lot better.
Mhm.
But the audio, somebody can play an audio conversation on the other side, and just type in what they want, and it can sound just like me. So I can sound like I'm talking to myself, right?
Yeah, I've
Or
seen that on the news where people, receive a phone call
yeah,
and they think it's their child or whatever,
exactly.
and they're getting basically ransomware
Yeah,
attack, but faking a an event, right? That they captured your child or something.
yep, horrific event,
Yeah,
or something like that, right?
yeah,
So what we have to do is, we really, security awareness training, it goes a long way, right? We really need to train employees to have that security mindset, and the one and done, or the one time of year, when you do a large annual training for all your HR, this, that, and the other, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to change the culture and budge the needle, right? It needs to be something continuous. And we need to teach our folks that, hey, this kind of stuff is out there. Acknowledge that people are using artificial intelligence, so it's going to be very, very sophisticated and crafty, right? And how do you identify it? If somebody says, "Oh yeah, I know when it's got poor grammar, or the numbers that they put in are wrong," or something like that, those days are gone. So we need to, again, continually
yeah.
educate our folks.
Like you said, it's becoming very difficult to thread, and I can't echo that enough on what you're saying on the one and done,
Yeah,
because we've all probably been in the one and done training somewhere along our careers, right?
yep,
Me personally, 25 years in business on both sides of the table, working at different size enterprises. You go through, and if it's just click through, and you take a test and you get it wrong, and then you just go back and you re-enter the correct answer, and you're just winging it kind of thing,
right.
right? And then it's
Just
done,
checking
and
the
okay,
box.
this wasted, you're thinking at the time, this wasted 15 minutes or 30 minutes of my time, and
Yep,
but I got to do it, and you get done. And in today's environment, with how things have matured, to your point, if that's what people are doing, they have to take it to the next level, or
yep,
they're going to be breached. It's not a matter of if, but when.
yep, exactly. So let's jump to the next one here. So mitigating some of the potential for ransomware. So there are a couple of quick, easy wins, and I'll talk about the first. I'll talk about the second one there first. The data encryption, right? So we talk about people getting onto the network, capturing your data. Well, what if they captured your data, but it's encrypted, and they don't have the encryption key? They've got a blob of nothing that's worthless to them, right? So I would say absolutely encrypt the data that you've been entrusted with, your customers' data, your third-party vendor, business associates that you people you do business with. Encrypt that data. Computing power is strong now. That encryption should not limit the performance, right? So that is one absolute thing. Encrypt your backups. Make sure you've got backups and that kind of stuff. So we can take some simple steps, right, so that we don't end up falling victim to that.
Right. With those backups not on the same data
Yes.
server, not in
Yep.
the same geolocation,
Right.
all those, all those different things, right?
Yep. And then endpoint protection. And most people say, well, I've got antivirus or I've got endpoint detection and response. Those are fantastic. I'm talking about endpoint protection, and think application whitelisting, application allowed listing, where it can it runs complementary to your antivirus, to your endpoint detection and response. And what it basically does is keep everything in its swim lanes. It says, hey, you are Adobe Reader. You get to read PDFs, and that's it. If that PDF has a script, like I talked about before, and wants to talk to PowerShell, and then PowerShell wants to reach out to the internet and do some, trickery there, get some badness downloaded and that kind of stuff, I'm going to stop all of those because Adobe Reader should not ever talk to PowerShell. PowerShell shouldn't ever talk to the internet, right? So it's going to say, nope, this communication is cut off. This communication here is cut off. It keeps everybody in their swim lane, and you start reducing that internal attack surface where it makes it more difficult for the bad guys, right? Or even the good guys that are doing a penetration test for you. It makes it more difficult to execute what we've got to do. Now we have to look for different ways, right? Because it's a lot easier for me to just, throw 10,000, malicious emails out there and hoping that, gee, somebody's going to click on them, right? If I can throw out 10,000 and it didn't take me very long to do it, and I just wait for one or two people to click, I own them, and then I'm in, and then then the fun starts. Um, Rather than saying, oh, I'm going to find your organization, I'm going to do all of my, open source intelligence, I'm going to try and find vulnerabilities to come in from the outside. So much easier for me to just throw something over the fence. They pick it up, they say, oh, go to door, open door. Okay, open the door, great, I did, and let the bad actors just walk right on in.
Right.
So
And that information is out there,
yeah.
um, everywhere, right? We put it on LinkedIn, we have it
Yeah.
in whatever websites, right? I mean, our credentials are out there. Even if ours is not specifically out there, the chances are one of our coworkers is. And
Somebody.
so they can figure out that the email convention is first name dot last name, whatever, right? To your point
Right.
of just throwing a bunch of emails out to people. But that's really interesting what you're saying about application behavior that
Yeah.
you can actually protect against. And maybe some of us on this call aren't familiar with PowerShell, but we probably are with Adobe, and knowing that Adobe is not supposed to talk to other applications in a certain way, that there is a
Yeah.
tool to protect against those malware, um,
Yeah.
being attached to it.
Yep. Absolutely. And then let's jump to the last one here. So this is where, so you say, okay, I've got endpoint detection and response. That's where I always like to let people know, okay, who's getting those detections, who's getting those alerts, right? That's the first thing to check. You can't just say, well, I've got endpoint detection and response, so I'm good. Well, you have the right tool, but if the tool is just sitting there on the shelf and not tuned properly, and somebody isn't doing it, because the whole idea is, hey, we're going to look for this anomalous behavior. Now, anomalous behavior, and I use that term loosely, right, is normal to most IT administrators, right? Most system administrators, network administrators will, you know, do a remote session onto a workstation. They will elevate their permissions because they're troubleshooting an issue for an end user, right? And so they'll do it remotely. They will, broker their credentials. They'll, update something, patch something, do something like that, right? Those are normal activities, but those are also the same types of activities that bad actors will use and exploit and leverage. And so how do you tell the difference between good and bad? Well, that's where you get those alerts, and those alerts need to be run to ground. Everybody needs to kind of get those. They need to start doing their investigation and that sort of thing. And you get a lot of those alerts, right? So you're looking for a needle in a stack of needles, and imagine you get hundreds, if not thousands, of these alerts every single day, right? And you got somebody who's sitting there saying, okay, I'm coming in, I'm looking at imagine you have an email inbox and all the emails are critical. You can't just go through and say, no, that's spam. Oh, that's junk. Oh, that's just an advertisement. Okay. Everything is valid. Everything says, oh, had remote access here. Oh, had elevated permissions here. You suddenly then have to figure out what the sharpest, the pointiest needle is in that stack of needles that really needs your attention, right? Because it's all about dwell time, right? Remember I talked about the 62 minutes. The fastest breakout time that we've seen recorded is 2 minutes and 37 seconds.
Holy moly.
So 2 minutes and 37 seconds from the time that Sally clicks on something to then that person has access and then has moved laterally to another computer in that network, right? You have to be able to detect that. So
yeah, and
so
if they get to the right spot quick enough,
yeah,
they're going to hide themselves, right?
yeah,
They're going to get in, and then they're going to make it look like they weren't there.
yeah.
And but it sounds of it, AI takes it. This is again, I'm not the real engineering wizard. You are. Does this apply differently than, say, vulnerability scanning or a SIM type tool on what you're doing with threat detection response here? Is it pulling
Yeah,
those in together to detect behavior and
it
what
does.
is not normal?
Yeah, yeah. And so you want the artificial intelligence to really start kind of separating the noise from the legitimate for you, right? So it'll use
Yeah.
those types of SIM type tools where it aggregates information from different sources, right? So you have and SIM being basically just your security information event management. So it's gathering log sources from your servers, from your firewalls, from your switches, from all of your endpoints, and it's correlating all of that data. And then it leverages the artificial intelligence to kind of look through, and it says, well, I know what the MITRE attack framework looks like. I know the tactics that bad actors would use. This doesn't look like that. Or pattern recognition. Yeah, this looks like this. Yeah, this looks exactly like what this attacker does. And then it raises that alert, right? And
So
the
it's
idea
taking it
really
to the
is,
next level and
yeah,
filtering out, you know, what becomes fatigue, alert fatigue, where a
yeah,
human just can't deal with it. And so you have so much, you just can't deal with it. And so you're just vulnerable.
yeah,
So by implementing this AI driven threat detection and response, you're making the data in a more consumable, logic, informative manner to the human
yeah,
to then be able to take action. Is that?
yep. That's you.
Yeah.
You've
Okay.
nailed it. You've nailed it. Congratulations, you're a cybersecurity
Yeah,
pro.
yeah, I'm learning here. You're good. You're a good teacher. I'm learning.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. So those are some strategies. So let me sum this all up here. So 5 steps, some key takeaways, so that we can kind of distill this down, because we've talked about a lot of things, right? Security awareness training. I can't hammer that home enough. If you're not taking care of your employees, you know, like we say here, they're your last line of defense, but they're your first line of offense, right? The TSA has a great catchphrase. I can't stand it, quite honestly, but if you see something, say something, right? And what we want to do is we want to make it safe for someone to see, you know, hey, see some activity and say, hey, this doesn't look right, and report that to somebody, right? Hopefully in IT or something where somebody says, oh, you know, but they might be the first ones that see this bad activity, or they might be the ones that clicked on something and then saw something that said, you know, this looks a little sketchy. Oh, you know, and they want to just stop and call somebody and say, hey, I did this. This is what I did, right? We don't want them to be like, oh, let me try and sweep it under the rug, because that's never going to work, right? That's not going to go well for us. So we create a culture of safety, and we make everybody a cybersecurity ambassador, right? They can live it, and they can take these tools and practice them at home, right? So they can be more cyber safe at home. You know, now you're bringing them into the fold, and they're saying, yeah, I want to be a defender, right? I don't want to be a victim. So detection and response, right? So we've talked quite a bit about that, right? Because again, we've heard it said, prevention is ideal, detection is a must, right? All preventive measures will fail. So every antivirus we have, you know, everything will fail at some point, right? Or can be gotten around, right? We have to make sure that our prevention, so this is the algebra equation here. Prevention, the P, has to be greater than the detection plus the response time, right? If we can detect and respond sooner, before that prevention eventually runs out, right, we can reduce that dwell time and hopefully not have the bad actors getting onto our networks and creating all kinds of havoc. Okay. How do you do some of this stuff? Get some visibility into your security gaps, right? We do that in a number of different ways, right? So you can start out with maybe a risk assessment. You can do kind of a compliance assessment. Do some vulnerability management. Kind of start looking at, hey, what parts of my network, what parts of my systems are vulnerable? What ports are hanging open? What things do I potentially have misconfigured? Maybe I think I've got complex passwords turned on in Active Directory, but maybe I have a group policy that's firing ahead of that, that's allowing weaker passwords. We've seen that, right? If you're a little bit more mature and you have a number of things, then maybe you consider doing a penetration test, right? You do a pen test to say, hey, get onto my network, try and hit me from the outside, get onto the inside, see if you can move around, right? I want to see how my layers of defense and depth are built and constructed, and can you get through them, right? Have the offense, the pen testers, inform the defense. Make an incident response plan. I cannot emphasize that enough. Is it going to be perfect? No. Will it ever be perfect? No, but it'll be close, right? It's an iterative process, right? But you have to document what you're going to do when stuff goes bad. That is not the time to throw your arms in the air and spin around in your chair, right? You say, hey, no, I've got a plan and I'm going to pull it off. Okay, so we have a malware or ransomware type thing. Okay, we need to disconnect that source from the network, right? We don't want to shut it down. We want to preserve some evidence, right? We go down the list. Okay, did they get to our critical data? Well, identify what that critical data is first and say, did they get to that, right? Are we seeing activity that's getting exfiltrated? You kind of just, you follow the recipe and, work with someone to start documenting, okay, what will we do if? And think outside of maybe a cybersecurity incident. Maybe you're talking about a down power line that's going to take your business offline for a few days, or a fiber optic cable gets cut and you have no internet connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Start thinking about those types of things and how do you respond to those. And then when you use that plan, you pull it out, you go follow the plan, have an after action sort of meeting where you say, hey, this worked well, this didn't work well, this was in step number 3, it should actually be step number 2. Revise that plan and put it back on the shelf and be ready for the next day. And then practice. Practice makes perfect. In the military, we practice things until you could just do it in your sleep. And they would wake you up in the middle of the night. And how quickly could you get online? How quickly could you get yourself geared up? How quickly could you get out the door? And you do it in muscle memory, right? And so you do that with tabletop exercises, which is a friendly sort of way of doing a pen test, right? It's not exploiting, but it's kind of conversational. You're working through different scenarios, what if scenarios. Continue to do that training. Train your inside defenders, shore them up. So let me tie all this together back to what this has to do with making brisket, if I can. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's back up. Let's hit this case study. Do we have time? We have 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're coming up on time because we do want to keep this to an hour. So we got 8 minutes really.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will talk about this really quick. So we had an organization that runs commissaries. And a commissary is basically, think of it like a 7-Eleven, a small 7-Eleven inside a jail or a prison. They operate in a 4-state area. They had about 150 jails and prisons that they create these little convenience stores for the prisoners to go in and get whatever it is they need to get. So this organization received a fake invoice, and they paid, the check, $10,000. Boom, sent it out. Didn't even miss a beat. 3 months later, they received a second invoice, and for a wire transfer for $250,000, and they approved it. A $250,000 wire transfer was nothing for this organization. They're about $150 million, and they're approving these types of
these are common transaction volumes for their business.
Yeah. The saving grace was Betty at their local bank, who just kind of, when they say yes, pay it, she just kind of goes through, rubber stamps it, and just pays it. She wasn't there that day. She was off for a few days. They suddenly started getting hounded by the vendor who sent in the fake invoice, aka the attackers. And they said, well, this is kind of odd. They only sent it to us, and why are you having a fit about needing this?
It's been a day or an hour or whatever.
Right. So that kind of tipped them off. Then the bank started looking at it, and they said, hey, this doesn't look right. This is not going to the normal routing numbers and that kind of stuff. So they canceled it. Well, they started having, so they said, disaster averted, right? But they started noticing some weird stuff going on. Turns out there was a malicious payload attached to that invoice. They called us up. We came on. Yep, you've got a bad actor. Because they said, hey, can you just kind of see if everything's okay? So we got onto their network, and unbeknownst to us, they were actually on the network, and kind of ready to launch a ransomware, because they missed out on their $250,000, so they were going to ransom them for a couple million probably.
Wow.
So we switched over to containment, eradication, remediation mode, got the bad actors out, and then made some other recommendations for them. One, for security awareness training, to be a little more careful and that kind of stuff. So that's an example of how this stuff unfolds, right? Sometimes it's months after the fact, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize we were that compromised, right?
Yeah.
So now,
you don't know till you know. So
yeah,
we're all mouth-watering here to eat your brisket and know how do they correlate to one another, cybersecurity and making good brisket.
Yeah, so brisket, like I said, is a labor of love. Cybersecurity is the same, right? It's a journey of 10,000 miles among 10,000 landmines, and then 1,000 more, right? It's a continual thing, right? You're never going to arrive. It's a continual thing, right? So preparation is key. Take a low and slow approach. Continue putting one foot in front of the other and just shoring things up as you can, right? Some of the stuff is pretty easy to do. Some of it takes a little time, right? So you just want to make sure that you're continuing to move forward and tweak and adjust, right? Monitor and adjust as you see fit, just like when you're smoking a brisket, right? Is it too moist, or is it getting too dry? Is it getting too done? When do I need to wrap it? That type of thing. Layer your defense in depth, just like you layer flavors, right? You want the the good bark, the seasonings, the smoke flavor, and all that kind of stuff, right? Same type of thing. And then learn from your mistakes, right? Expertise and experience matters, right? So if you make a mistake, don't just give up, right? Learn from that, apply that, and adjust, right? Adjust your plan. Keep making that plan. So that's how you do it. And I hope this was informative. And
It
we
was.
have questions.
I've got a couple questions here that or at least one we can get in. I know you guys have this event coming up, just to mention as well. Um, I'll throw it out there. Take a look. Scan that QR if you're interested. We're gonna go over that quickly, just in the interest of time. Um, but when we were talking about different things, we were talking about security awareness training. We were talking about email filtering. We were talking about the essential endpoint protection. And there's definitely a reason we have you all on this call, Telesystem, is because you have these solutions and you have the expertise to help clients with this. And something that we saw as a consultant in the marketplace and a trusted advisor that's really unique is that by bundling your phone system requirements with the need which you need for security, because it's also an application that goes on your tablet, your phone, your laptop, right? There's a true value in doing that. So just wanted to put that up along with the consulting that comes with it from you all. But question wise, um, are the how would you recommend somebody first take an approach to starting, like, where do they start? I know if they email me, there's my email. We're going to give them a detailed dark web report, and we'll have you on to review it with the client as the expert. And then that may be a starting point. But outside of that, where should companies be starting to implement, or diagnose
Yeah.
where they are,
Yeah.
picking the right cut of beef before they cook their brisket?
Right. Right. I hear you. We do that a couple of different ways. One, just when we get on the call, I just start asking questions and tell me about your cybersecurity posture, right? Tell me about your cybersecurity program. Typically, I will get one of two responses. Well, I have this, and this, and that type of thing, and I'm ready to go to the next level. Or more often, I get the deer in the headlights. What do you mean cybersecurity program? I don't have one, right? We hear folks say, well, I need a pen test so that I know to start, so that I know the things that I need to fix. And I would say, yeah, no. If you don't have a number of pieces in place already, a pen test is going to be very low value, right? Let's do a cybersecurity assessment, which is a little different, a little less invasive. It's kind of like the first half of a pen test. We send them a device, plug it into the network. We run a number of tools. We pull a bunch of information back. They get a lot of technical data, but then we summarize that in a nice executive format and say, hey, here's where you start. Here's the low-hanging fruit. Here's what you should, jump in with, and again, security awareness training is probably the easiest. Again, we have the bundle there, and so they can tackle three things. If they don't have the, email filtering, the security awareness training, and the endpoint protection, they can consume those three pretty easily and start down the path. Because what we found is if an attacker needs to get around 3 or 4 items that you've put in place, 3 or 4 preventive measures that you've put in place, they're going to stop and they're going to move on to somebody else who's an easier target, right? If they have to get around email filtering, then they have to get around, I can't engineer this person. Oh, and they've got endpoint protection,
Yeah, so
right?
they just move on because it's
Hackers
not
have a
worth
short
their time.
attention span, right? Hackers have a short attention span, just like all of us. Hey,
They
so
sit in a
Scott,
cubicle.
yeah, Scott
They-
Chili and Henry Cruz and Sean Marcel, thank you so much for today. I've got a new hashtag, not just your lovely hackers suck. How about hashtag no bad actors, right? And I love what you had to say. I want to be a defender, and protection is ideal. So thank you so much for today. We're excited that you got this great words out and wisdom, and we'll definitely be contacting Telesystems. We'll be contacting Cirrustel so we can protect ourselves and gain from your wisdom and knowledge. So thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
Yeah,
you.
thank you so
CPT.
much for
Thank you for
having
having
us,
us.
Lisa, and just reach out to myself or Henry, and we can definitely help. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye,
day, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.